Hello again. We're back for another little painting session, and here's our palette for today. Red, yellow, blue, plus some black and white and a little yellow ochre because that's a good color for our little female cardinal. But we'll be mixing all of our other colors, all the pretty pastels in the background. And we've got our 3 brushes, the flat, the smaller flat, and a little round for detail like the eyes and the beak, our water and our paper towel, and we're ready to paint. So this red paint is a little on the thin side, so I think just to get started it would be good to go ahead and put down 1 coat on our little male cardinal so that we can come back later and get it to cover nice. It's just a little bit thin on that first coat. It looks a little more pink than red. So we're just going to block him in. I used the big brush. And I don't have to be too careful about the eyes and the beak because I can always redefine them later. In fact, it looks like I can paint over them and the pencil lines are still there, more or less. So that just gives us a little foundation to work with later. And now we're going to think about our background. We're going to try to make it look cool and wintry, lots of white. So I'll start with my big brush, and I'm just going to pull some white out here. Make sure you guys can see what I'm doing. A little bit, a tiny bit of blue. I don't want to get too much color. I want it to be mostly the white showing. A little bit of red. Make it a little bit of a purplish color here. That's not bad. Let's start with that. And we're just going to start actually maybe a little more red. Just kind of laying this in randomly. We'll put in some branches here in a minute, but we'll start just by filling in some background color. And I'm just doing a light coat. Now I'm going to, I want a little green, so to make green I'll use a little yellow here with the white and the blue. That's a little bit brighter than I want, so I'm going to put more white in it. I want the colors to be very, very washed out. Maybe even a little red to dull it. And I'm just going to, again, picking random places, just adding in some pretty pastel colors. Let's see, we'll go back to more of a purpley blue, lots of white. That one's, I haven't rinsed my brush, and so these colors are going to mix together a little bit, but for what we're doing, that works. So this ends up looking a little bit gray, but for winter color, that's good. Okay, a little more blue. Lots of variety here. Kind of get that in there. Let's see. How about a little bit of an orangey peachy color? So that'll be yellow, white, and a smidge of red. Get that to go a little bit orange. Oh, that was a lot of yellow. Got to sneak up on it. Where's my red? There it is. Now I'm starting to see that kind of peachy color. Let's put some of that in there. Maybe a little more red even. See how it is though? It's so easy to get it too saturated. All right. rinse out my brush a little bit since I've had quite a few different colors on there. Go back to more of that kind of bluish color. Start filling in there. Kind of brush them together. Get some nice soft blending of the different colors. Oops, picked up red. Back to blue, because blue is going to be kind of a dominant color back here. So I'm just kind of cross-hatching random strokes. Slow down for a minute. Think about lots of white in here. Oops, picked up blue. We'll add a little red to make it more purpley. That's pretty. Oh, see, I didn't mix it all the way, so I got that bold. But I can just pick up more white and get that to tone down. That's pretty. Kind of gives us some nice random soft color in the background. Might do a little more here. Maybe a little more of a green. Being careful, that's a little bold, so we'll add more of that white in there. There we go. Just kind of hint at some greenery. That's pretty bright though. Okay, let's call that a soft little background. So let's think about branches now. So we're going to use the yellow ochre and the black to start with to get a kind of dull brown color here. We're going to add a tiny bit of white to it, not much. So you have something kind of like this. And I will, if that feels a little bit green, which it does, I'll add a tiny bit of red to warm it. So now I'm just going to think about basic branch structure here. We can kind of paint over the little feet and put them in at the end. They're kind of a tiny detail. And now I get to start kind of free forming it with these branches. So I do like having this branch that comes behind her. It's a little, maybe a little more black in there, a little darker. Black and yellow ochre makes a good branch color. And then we'll have another branch that V's up this way behind him. And those can be some more forward branches, they're darker. And then we can add some white to that color and really wash it out. Maybe even a little more white. We want them to be barely visible, kind of soft. So now then these branches, we can just kind of put in maybe even a little more white. We don't want them to be as dominant as the first branches. So now we're just going to kind of create some little branches out here going different directions. Let's see, we can have one here. cross back this way. And then we can have, let's see, what do we want something back here too. Switch to my right hand. And that gives us a very light sense of branches that are pushed back a little farther back into the scene. All right, so I'll rinse. And I'll take the smaller flat brush with that darker color that we started with. Maybe if I can find it. Somewhere in there. And go ahead and make sure I see this little branch under him. Oh, I missed this little triangle with background color. Oops. We'll get it. Okay, so now with that smaller brush, I'll go ahead and think about filling in that little triangle I skipped over with a little soft background color. There we go. So that gets us started on our background. And now we can look at our little birds. Okay, so we have that first coat down with the little male, the bright red one. Now we can get a coat on our little girl. She's going to use the yellow ochre. And let's see, yellow ochre over here. Let's add a tiny bit of white to it, not much. Not like that, maybe even a little bit of red. I mean, I barely touch that red. Okay, so we're gonna just, with the big brush, sweep in again a base coat, more or less. They're all fluffed up because it's cold, so they look cute and round. And then we'll add a tiny bit of black. Oops, that was a lot of black. Don't add that much to the yellow ochre to get that warm or darker tone in her wing. Maybe add a tiny bit of red to it too. Oh, was that too much red? No, that's good. And then if I can use the big brush, I will, just to kind of get some of this darker going around her beak. All right, that's a start for her. So now we'll go back to this guy. This red's nice and dry. And our second coat hopefully will be red instead of pink. So let's see. He's got some dark in his wing, so that'll be red and a tiny bit of black. Let's start though with just the red again. Add a little bit of yellow to it. And I'm just going back over what I did earlier. And she's a little bit in front of him, so I'll try to paint right up to her little chest. Now I'll do that little tiny bit of black. And that was a lot, but we can add more red to it. And streak some of that in her little, or his little wing. I'll do as much as I can with the big brush, and then we'll switch to the smaller brush. Now see, that was just a little heavy on the black there, but I can add red on top of it. Okay, so that's enough with the big brush. Let's switch to that smaller flat brush. And let's go ahead and think about his little crest here. Get that painted in nicely. And then with that darker color I had mixed up, the black plus the red, we'll start kind of pulling out some little feathers here under his beak. Maybe a hint of that darker color right here. And maybe even a little bit of it, not too much, on the tummy. So just a little bit of feather there. And I'll go back with more just red on top of that dark that I put in the tail. It was a little darker than I meant to do. I'll do some little darker strokes through there to suggest some feathers. And we want orange beaks for both of them, so we'll make our own orange with the red and the yellow. We'll probably take 2 coats of this to get good coverage on the beaks, so we'll start just kind of filling that in. It's going to go on really thin, but we'll just do it once and then let it dry and do it again. Because that does look thin. That's okay though. And that means we can start looking at her for some extra color. So she's got a little red in her little crest up here. And I'll tone it down with a little bit of black, just so it's not too bold. The females may not be bright red, but they're beautiful with all their little variations. We'll put a little bit of that in her wing and in her tail. I'm going to add more of the yellow ochre though. I want to get that in there too. So I got a little carried away. I'm going to lighten up at the base of her tail with some gold or yellow ochre and white. So I want to come back and soften that back in. Blend it out a little more. And what about around her face? I really want more of that gold black mix. It's a little darker. That's pretty dark. Maybe put a little bit of that darker color in her tail feathers. So they have these little markings around their beak and their eye. It's all black. I'll switch to the tiny brush for this. And I just want to kind of support my hand with my pinky on the canvas and kind of get a little black marking around the beak. And it would kind of lead over into this eye, and this all kind of flows together. A little mask that they have. And then we want to do the same thing on her. eye comes out from the corner of her little beak, about right there. Kind of like that. And I think I want to streak a couple little black feathers in her wing, maybe even in her tail. A little water if it drags. There we go. That's a little better. And this would be his other eye over here, but you wouldn't really see it. Same with her. You only see the one eye. Oops.